Well, good morning, and it's a wonderful Friday the 13th of January, a fabulous Friday, a fantastic Friday. I hope that you are ready to hear about another hymn writer. I'm Rocky Stevenson, pastor of Benoni Bible Church, and let's talk. We're looking this morning at Joseph Addison, or Joseph Addison, Addison. And he lived from 1672 to 1719. So he died at the young age of 47 years old. Some of these guys didn't live massively long, and yet they had such meaningful lives. I think possibly that's because they didn't live in an era where we have what's called kidults. I'm sure you've heard of kidults before. It's adults that actually stay kids and stay with mom and dad until they're in their 30s and sometimes their 40s. But here's a man who lived until 47 and yet lived such a full life, one of the famous hymn writers, and really just one of the men that was known as one of the great literary geniuses of England, Joseph Addison. And he planned to follow even in his father's footsteps, as his father was a clergyman. And he went and studied at Magdalen College in Oxford. He was excellent in literary studies and was especially skilled in writing Latin verse. And so he studied much of Latin and wrote much of it as well. And he began to be so interested in two other careers, writing as well as diplomatic service. And so this was something that really interested him. I'd thought when I started something like Fabulous Fridays, I thought I would look at something like Future Fridays, because we have memorable Mondays. But I'm sure that as we look at some of these things, we will see even some eschatological themes that come out inside of Fabulous Fridays. And what a joy it is to even look at somebody like Joseph Addison, one of these hymn writers of old. And here's a hymn that he wrote, and it's such a beautiful hymn. I thought I'd read that to you as well, and just so that you get a bit of context. He became quite famous for one of his poems that he wrote because of some political events, and I'll touch on that in a moment. But that poem is so incredibly long that if I had to read that to you, it would far exceed the 15-minute slot that I have this morning with you. But here he wrote this marvelous hymn. He was a devout Christian, and listen to the words of this. He says, "When all thy mercies, O my God, my rising soul surveys, transported with the view, I'm lost in wonder, love, and praise. Thy providence my life sustained, and all my wants redressed, while in the silent womb I lay and hung upon the breast. To all my weak complaints and cries, thy mercy lent an ear. Ere yet my feeble thoughts had learned to form themselves in prayer. Unnumbered comforts on my soul thy tender care bestowed, before my infant heart conceived, from whose those comforts flowed. When in the slippery paths of youth with heedless steps I ran, thine arm unseen conveyed me safe, and led me up to man." What beauty of this man wrote with. "Through hidden dangers, toils, and deaths, it gently cleared my way, and through the pleasing snares of vice, more to be feared than they. When worn with sickness, oft heart through with health renewed my face, and when in sins and sorrows sunk, revived my soul with grace. 10,000 precious gifts my daily thanks employ, nor is the least a thankful heart that takes those gifts with joy. Through every period of my life thy goodness I'll pursue, and after death in distant worlds the pleasing theme renew. Through all eternity to thee a grateful song I'll raise, but oh, eternity's too short to utter all thy praise. What a fabulous hymn to think on here on Fabulous Friday of Joseph Addison, and indeed, as a devout Christian, he is serving the Lord Jesus now and even worshiping him with the angelic hosts above. What a glory it is to think on the eternal bliss of the soul that has Christ as Lord. In order to gain some knowledge of foreign courts, as well as to get ideas for his writings, Joseph Addison went to Italy on a traveling scholarship in the 1700s. In 1700. And from there he moved to Switzerland, to Vienna and Germany, and finally to the Netherlands, and returned to England upon the death of his father. In 1704, a French and Bavarian army threatened the city of Vienna. Although they were outnumbered, England, as well as its allies, surprised the French, and the French had been quite the force at this time, and they had been undefeated for about 50 years. And Blenheim was where they really surprised the French army. The Duke of Marlborough actually captured the French commander along with 13,000 of the Franco-Bavarian troops, and it was the first major French defeat in around 50 years. And to celebrate the victory, Joseph Addison wrote the poem, The Campaign. If you want to go and look up his poem, it's called The Campaign, a marvelously lengthy poem, and the poem gained such immediate success. It was such an aid to the Whig Party that Addison was appointed Under Secretary of State in 1706. So this is how much fame his poem actually awarded him, that he became Under Secretary of State and Secretary of State in 1717 under King George I. From 1708 until his death, Addison had a seat in Parliament. He became somebody so famous just by his writings that he got a seat in Parliament. There was actually no other individual relying on literary talent alone that had risen to such a high state of affairs. Addison is perhaps best known for his essays, which he wrote a number of essays throughout his life, and they appeared in the Tatler and later in the Spectator, and these famous newspapers in the day of Queen Anna. And it was really written in collaboration with Richard Steele, which was one of Addison's classmates and lifelong friends, and their writing and their model was really polished, elegant English, and they intended to shape the morals and the compass of the youth of the day. And he desired to really put this out, and he had such a sense of humor and integrity in the way in which he wrote. Those who knew Joseph remembered him as a kind individual, as somebody with great integrity, and the charm and the humor of his essays reflected his personality, and it really illustrated the truth that if one smiles into the mirror of the world, then you'll receive a smile back. And so what a thing to think on for a moment. You just see this man soldiering on, being what the Lord had called him to be, continuing to be somebody who would actually just put one foot in front of the other, serving the Lord in his day, writing various essays, writing different poems. Sometimes Addison append a poem to one of his essays, and from the source comes 5 hymns of rare beauty. They are called what's named the creation hymns. Some of these hymns were the spacious firmaments on high, and then how are thy servants blessed, O Lord. The next one, the Lord my pasture shall prepare, and then when rising from the bed of death, and when all thy mercies, O my God, which is the one that we read earlier on. In the essay introducing the last hymn, Addison wrote, any blessing which we enjoy, by what means salva derived, is the gift of him who is the great author of good and the Father of mercies. Joseph Addison was a devout Christian, and even when he was dying, and this is something to take with you as you think through this fantastic Friday, even while on his deathbed, he cared more for others. He prayed for others. He continued to be a man of prayer even on his deathbed. And while on his deathbed, he was actually praying not for himself. He was praying for his brother-in-law, the Earl of Warwick, who was not a believer, and he cared that this man was going to an eternity lost and apart from the grace of Christ. He gave the gospel and desired that this man would come to faith. And so Addison asked the one that was taking care of him to allow the Earl to come to his bedside. And in a most gentle and as well as a modest way, he said to the Earl, "See in what peace a Christian can die." Addison is buried at Westminster Abbey. And so this man, just a great hymn writer, great poet, we still value his writings even in our day, and a man that had risen to actually such political spheres, always having a seat in the parliament because of actually just literary greatness and the way in which he used the English language and the way in which he wrote. And so we thank God for a man like this that the Lord used in his day to really bring about much of a needed pen to paper regarding the greatness of who God is. And as you go and study up some of his hymns, and you look at what he has written and some of the poems which are left from him, you see a rich heritage of somebody that delighted in God's world and delighted in who God is, and continued to just shine forth the greatness of who his God is to his family, to his friends, to people that were around him. And so let me encourage you this Friday to think upon that for this weekend. When last was it that you maybe took pen to paper and just put out a few words about the greatness of your great God? Or maybe wrote something to your children or to your wife or to your husband and desired to make your words say something beautiful about the great God who has made us. Isn't it marvelous that we have the privilege of being beings that communicate and are able to speak to one another, that you can hear my voice over the radio or over the podcast, that you're able to even enjoy the language and to be able to have themes and pictures come to mind as you think through what is being discussed. Isn't it marvelous that God would use men throughout history to write down marvelous hymns that we even sing still today? So may the Lord bless your fabulous, fantastic Friday, and may you continue to think on him even this weekend as you go into it. May you be somebody that even would sing the hymns that that many have left for us, and may we go even into eternity worshiping our great God, even along with these men that wrote the hymns in the past. So may the Lord bless you as you go into your weekend. Blessings. Bye.